Welcome to Latest TV, and today we're joined by Geoffrey Bowden, the political editor of Radio Reverb. Welcome, Geoffrey.
Hello.
Now, you've had many political roles yourself in the city. What have been the highlights?
Well, I'm also a recovering politician because I used to be a councillor in Queen's Park, which, lo and behold, has got a by-election.
Another by-election.
I can, if I was allowed to do an imitation of Brenda from Bristol, what, another by-election? Well, there is another by-election. We had an election in 2023 when 2 councillors were elected. One of the councillors had to stand down because she was exposed to be a fraud.
That's right.
And we had a by-election in the following year, and Councillor Miller-Gage was returned. She represents Labour. And the remaining original councillor, Councillor Tristan Bowden, has stepped down this time to pursue a career move, which doesn't completely push him out of the sphere of local government, because he's taking up a post in with the Care Quality Commission as one of their inspectors of social care delivery.
So there are 6 candidates now.
There are.
And you've interviewed them all.
I have.
Give us a little rundown. Shall I read out their names?
Okay, well,
Simon Charlton.
Simon Charlton is pretty well known in the ward. He, until he stepped down, he was chair of the St Luke's Residents Association, which operates around Queen's Park. He's a former Labour councillor, so he's represented Labour in St Peter's North Lane when he lived there, and he's very keen to point out he lives in the ward.
Right.
And he is now standing, and he's also represented Queen's Park in the distant past as well.
He's done a lot of work for St John's in the ward too.
Yeah, a special school for autistic children. But he's also an experienced. He has been a teacher, so he has a lot of experience to offer voters.
Sonny Chowdhury.
Now, Sonny Chowdhury, that's an interesting character. Many people will know Sonny Chowdhury as an activist in the Labour Party. But he fell out of love with the Labour Party, I think, during the Corbyn years, and jumped ship and joined the Conservatives. He too lives on the cusp of the ward. Almost. We have had boundary changes since my day, and he has worked with community groups, largely with the police and law and order. So that's his thing. Didn't like it when he was complaining about antisocial behaviour and the police action. When I pointed out that the Police and Crime Commissioner came from his own party, that seemed to be an uncomfortable moment for him.
Rudy Dicty Dowdian.
I'm glad you pronounced his surname. Very nice man. He is a local resident as well. He has a mixed background. He's from South America via Germany. Is a German translator and lives with his partner and his dog in the ward. Very interesting. A bit vague on some of the policies, and when I talked to him about whether he thought people who remembered the Lib Dems getting into bed with Conservatives and their broken promise about school tuition fees, he didn't seem to have a recollection about that, but I think some students may well do if they've been able to register to vote, because we ought to talk about the short notice of this particular election as well, and when it's happening.
When is it happening?
18th of September, but you would need to have registered for a postal vote by the 3rd of September.
Okay, so very soon.
And also, if you want to appoint a proxy, you've got a tight deadline as well.
Okay, so the remaining 3 candidates, Adrian Hart, independent, he stood for the last by-election in the ward.
Adrian Hart appears at every election in Queen's Park. He is a local resident as well. He has a particular bee in his bonnet about safeguarding and safeguarding around trans issues, and there is an inquiry into a particular surgery in Brighton Hove where it's claimed they are prescribing drugs to change people's orientation or help change their orientation, and he's described that as a sort of a conveyor belt from school to surgery.
Okay. Marina
Ledermacher, let me help you with that. She's
Green Party.
She's with my old muckers at the Green Party. I'm a recovering politician, and she's a very eloquent young lady. Is an academic, but teaches in special needs schools as well. She did try and talk to me about the mismanagement of finances, and felt a bit uncomfortable when I pointed out to her that the I-360 was a product of the last Green administration, even though it had been originally supported by the Labour Party. They didn't vote for it at the end of the day, but I felt she slightly shifted and was slightly uncomfortable. But we can talk about the common themes that are coming up according to the candidates on the doorstep.
Okay, and there's another candidate, John Shepherd, Reform.
Another interesting character, a former journalist.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't answer the question about when I got onto the inevitable main policy of reform that people know about on immigrants and asylum seekers. He mouthed all the policies that Nigel Farage has just been talking about. If they come in a boat illegally, they'll be thrown out immediately. He couldn't tell me where and how much it would cost either. So we can talk about the bread and butter issues. He lives in the ward, he knows it quite well. So we've got a 6 candidates who all live either directly in the ward or next to the ward.
Okay, and who's your money on?
It's a hard thing. You can't dismiss. I would say front runners in this will still be Labour and the Greens. I'm not convinced that the Liberal Democrats will have much of a chance. They're a bit thin on the ground in terms of membership. I did ask the question whether he will be paddle boarding on the lake in Queen's Park and falling off just in time for latest TV cameras to catch the splash. But that didn't seem to be his style, even though it's the style of his leader up in Westminster.
And what are the key issues in Queen's Park?
By the way, I wouldn't discount reform showing quite, because it was revealed to me that there are no other by-elections going on at the moment, and maybe world headquarters of Reform UK will be pouring resources into the ward to try and convince people that they've got the answers to everything.
And do you miss not being in the race yourself?
No, I don't. I'm far rather I hold people's feet to the fire because I know how the system works. So when they make outrageous remarks which have nothing to do with local government but all to do with national government, and of course, although we've talked about Simon Charlton having a good chance, I would not discount the fact that there are many Labour supporters who are not happy with the way their government in Westminster is acting. And as I pointed out to Simon, it may be a national issue on things like benefits, but it is voters in the ward who will be affected by a reduction in disability benefits and other benefits. And so they may well vote according to their own experience of this government. And then there are wider issues, very divisive issue on Gaza. The government has straddled the fence for a long time about what its position is. And we know that there are some people in Brighton and Hove who are strongly opposed to what is going on in Gaza. And they too might want to punish the Labour candidate as a result of the vacillation on their position.
Okay, well, Geoffrey, stick with us and we'll talk about the wider context of this Queen's Park by-election. Thank you. If you have a local news story you would like to share with our viewers, please email us at news@thelatest.co.uk. Thank you for watching. Welcome to Latest TV, and I'm joined by Geoffrey Bowden, a former politician in the city, and now political editor at Radio Reverb. Welcome.
Yes, I prefer to refer to myself as a recovering politician.
Recovering one. Now, you've given us a wonderful rundown of the 6 candidates who have put themselves forward for the Queen's Park by-election that's due to be called on September the 18th. But meanwhile, you think that what's happening nationally could affect how voters vote?
I think so. We have a Reform UK candidate. I've learned that Reform headquarters are going to be putting resources into this ward. So we could see a surge in their support. And then anyone travelling up and down the coast will have seen flags of St George's. We're in the studio in St George's Church, but the St George's flag has definitely been hijacked by those people who support the far right. And all the demonstrations you see come up on your screen on the national news, the St George's flag is very evident, and it's representing a far right view.
Because some people would find the words far right very emotive, because and some would argue that they are being proud for their country rather than adopting a far right position.
Sure.
How do you respond to that?
Well, and there would be some who are saying that they are whistleblowing and othering a whole section of people living in our country, whether they are legal, illegal. They have a right to seek asylum under the current legislation, and some people will bulk against that, and then people who broadly brush everyone as a criminal and they should be expelled, come what may, is tarring everyone with the same brush. The statistics on crimes like rape show that the overwhelming majority of rape cases are perpetrated by people within the family or friends, not asylum seekers. That is a tiny, tiny position in the stats. They don't lie. But, those people who want to exploit these fears are doing it.
So isn't there a case then for arguing that there should be more discussion about the facts? Because it does feel that Reform and perhaps tabloid newspapers have kind of hijacked the narrative in some way, and that Labour politicians are shying away from discussing people's fears and concerns.
Well, I think there has been a shying away, but if you listen to this Home Secretary-elect Cooper talking about the policies she wants to introduce, they sound very Reform UK-like.
But the Labour Party have been sending people back to...
They certainly have.
Even more so than under the Tories, which may not be that well known.
Well, they need to be shouting a bit more about that, and the reasons why people have been put back. People got fixated on the Rwanda policy and ignored the other issues. And Labour have certainly... It's a multifaceted approach that's needed, but they're not shouting loud enough to be heard by Reform. They're better. Reform UK, Nigel Farage in particular, and Richard Tice, the deputy, are brilliant communicators. So you hear what they're saying. You don't hear them actually explain how much these things will cost and what the consequences are. And it may well be, as when I used to appear on this channel with our old friend Andrew Kay, and we reviewed the LGBTQI international press, we used to come across stories from across the world where countries had othered a whole swathe of the population. In Poland, they used to boast that 60% of the country was LGBTQI plus free. We've got Mr. Orbán in Hungary, who demonizes gays. We've got Donald Trump doing the same thing again in America. And we've got people who admire these kind of extreme positions and want to see it implemented here in the UK. So we have a difficult time ahead. In the background, I have seen discussions of the left talking about forming alliances and perhaps coming together to put a different proposition to the population. And we've got Jeremy Corbyn talking about...
Is it the Your Party?
The Your Party at the moment, until they have a special conference later in September when they come up with a better name. But you have got people on the left talking about working together. Whether that happens or not, and they're talking about it in Brighton and Hove, there's quite a lot of chatter going on in the background about trying to give a more coherent voice to those people who oppose these policies, which will demonise a whole swathe of the population.
I mean, you're right to say people are being othered in the press by certain parties, and the discussion about this country needing a certain level of immigration as well is not clearly heard.
Well, you've interviewed me wearing another hat, where I am closely involved in the NHS, and you look down the staff lists of any NHS trust or GP surgery, and if you find there's British names in there as the majority, I suggest you're not looking close enough, because we are very reliant on people who have made their lives here and caring for us, who are brown or black and were not necessarily born in this country. So we need foreign workers, we need people to pick the fruit, do all those tasks that people don't want to do. And when we left the European Union by popular vote, not necessarily popular in Brighton and Hove, who voted 60% to remain, but it was a national vote, we saw an exodus of people from the NHS and from the hospitality sector, which is suffering. You talk to anyone from the Brighton Restaurants Association, terrible acronym, BRA, you talk to them about staffing levels and getting staff to stay.
It is still an issue, isn't it?
It is a huge issue. So those things will affect the next general election, and arguably some of the policies this government has introduced around minimum wage, national insurance, have exacerbated a bad situation. So we get stats coming out about the number of jobs lost in the hospitality sector. And this city is absolutely reliant on the hospitality sector. And we're losing skills and staff to keep those restaurants and pubs and venues going.
We've veered away from Queen's Park by-election.
We have.
But as you say, the national picture will influence local voting.
It will definitely.
And it will be interesting also, I mean, looking forward to the next general election, how young people will vote. Because at the moment, young people seem to be quite split in being, traditionally they're left voters, and you've got Jeremy Corbyn's party now rising again. And a certain number of young people will also be interested in voting for reform as well.
Well, yes. Any party on the menu will, pick, it may be just a name that appeals, but the government is talking at last about lowering the voting age, so younger people will be at the ballot box and determining the future. And, the more people who are engaged in politics affects you and me, Angie. And it's surprising, when I was in door-knocking mode, when I was a fully fledged politician, I used to knock on doors. They would be opened by young women who said, "Oh no, we don't vote." And I said, "Do you realise that your forebears used to throw themselves under racehorses in order to give you the vote,
Yes.
and you choose not to exercise it, which is terrible." I mean, I'm of a mind where I think the Australian approach is that you have to vote, otherwise you get fined. Maybe that's anti-democratic, but I think
no, I like that idea.
It is such a privilege because I've visited many countries, and I'm sure you have, where people do not have the vote, and especially women don't have the vote still. So to have a vote and not exercise it, I think is absolutely insane.
Appeal to our viewers now to vote in the Queen's Park ward.
Yeah, please do vote. You've got till about the 3rd of September to register if you want a postal vote, 5 p.m, 3rd of September. Go on the council website, tap in Queen's Park by-election into the search panel, and you'll find all the deadlines that you have, including if you can't be around, you want to appoint a proxy. You'll find out how to do that. But time is running out. This is a very short notice by-election. A lot of the students at the university who would normally have registered probably won't get round to it, and the universities haven't come back into play yet as we record this. So they may miss out and get very angry that they're going to miss out on voting here. And we do have a student population in Queen's Park. So vote on the 18th or before. I shan't say vote often, but that would be fraudulent. And do remember, you have to bring a form of ID. The website on the council website will tell you what forms of ID is acceptable.
Geoffrey, thank you very much for joining us again, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have a local news story you would like to share with our viewers, please email us at news@thelatest.co.uk. Thank you for watching.